about 6:10. That's about usually when we do it.
Okay.
Oh, what's this? I just started the recording. Let's see if that works. It looks like it's transcribing. Does that happen all the time?
Yeah, it does both. It'll record and
Oh,
transcribe.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, is that the chat? Anyway, so hey, everybody, welcome to the Austin Power BI user group. We have got Kevin Arnold here. Feel free to chat. We'll be monitoring the chats during his presentation. Do you want us to bug you, Kevin, during the thing, or save questions at the end, or?
Yeah, I enjoy questions during the session, and I have a pretty decent setup that I could watch the chat as well. So, we'll do questions while I'm talking. I enjoy the interaction, and it sometimes gives a different presentation. So that's great with me.
Awesome. So our agenda today, we're having this as our welcome. We're going to go to Kevin. He's going to talk about DAX Queries and Power BI Desktop, and then we've got some drawings for the rest of the time. So some good drawings. You can join Enterprise DNA and or Radicat if you're lucky in the on the Wheel of Fortune or whatever you call that thing. And that's about it. We've got you can find us out there on the socials and the LinkedIn groups and the GitHubs. We even got that. The meetup's probably the best spot for us.
Yeah,
I don't know if you heard us earlier, but we're
YouTube. Yeah, you probably already mentioned that. We'll be adding the YouTube thing.
Yeah, we're trying to get modern here. So, well, let's go ahead and get going. I'm gonna kind of pass it over to Kevin. So the background on Kevin, just from my standpoint, is I saw him in Atlanta and I saw him in North Austin. I've seen this talk once. I saw a different talk before, but I thought it was kind of over my head when I first arrived, and then I decided, oh no, this is exactly what I need. So even I'm not deep into DAX developing. I don't write a whole lot of measures, but the ones I do, I'm like, oh no, this is going to help a lot. So I'm pleased, Kevin, you agreed to give the same talk to us so we can learn something.
Fernando's seen it 256 times. He's been my practice session. All right. Well, when you're ready, I could start sharing.
Yeah, go ahead. Share. Go ahead. I'll stop.
Okay, and then let me get this set back up so I could see everything again. So yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for having me here. Yeah, Sean, it was great to see you in both Atlanta and North Austin. I really enjoyed those two SQL Saturdays. So if anybody gets a chance to attend SQL Saturdays, and my camera's doing this little switching thing again. So if I get really weird, I'm gonna zoom it back out a little bit. So yeah, attend SQL Saturdays, local SQL Saturdays, or travel for them. They're a bunch of fun. So all right. Let's introduce myself. So the topic, as we talked about, is going to be DAX queries in Power BI Desktop. It's a newer feature, so it's maybe one you haven't really looked at yet. About me, Kevin Arnold. So this is what I look like without a hat on. Most of the time, you're always going to see me with a hat on because I like how it looks better, which is what my little avatar or the devil over the shoulder shows for me. And I see Sean's putting the links out on the chat. So yeah, reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn, the social medias. You will recognize that little avatar there as well. There's another link, maybe I'll put it out later, but Chris Wagner and I, Kratos BI, we do a session every Friday on Fabric. We call it Fabric Fridays. So yeah, hopefully you'll come and join us. It's Friday morning Central Time at 7:30. It's a live stream on YouTube, so we interact with the chat and everything there. What are we going to talk about? Oh, I'm going to talk about data warehouses and how to look at the queries that have been run against your data warehouse and the performance of it. So we're going to dive deep into that. We always have a lot of fun. I always screw up my live demos, so that's what makes it fun. Okay, enough about me. If you want to follow along, there's this URL, and let me see if I could copy that and put it into the chat. This has Hopefully, yeah, that did come out as a link. So this has all the resources that I've been using to help put this together, including a GitHub repository that I started that has some of the sample DAX queries. I'll show you one towards the end of it, but I'm starting to collect some of these DAX queries that I think are helpful for people to get information about the metadata in their model. You're also welcome to contribute to that GitHub as well. So use that if you want to learn more about this. Okay, got 4 high-level areas, and we'll go through. We're first going to talk about what are DAX queries versus what are measures. Most people probably think about DAX and think about measures. We'll talk a little bit about where they're used in Power BI desktop, and then I'm going to talk about the measure development process. Sorry. So I want you all to think, because this is when it's going to become kind of audience participation. I'd like to hear or see in the chat, what do you do today for your measure development process? I'm going to show you 2 processes, and maybe I think the first one's going to resonate with how you might do it, but I'd like to hear from the audience a little bit. So get ready. I'm going to keep harping on you for this audience participation moment. And then last, we'll get into the new functions called the info functions that have been added. And this is what's going to allow you to get more metadata, maybe even a data dictionary out of your semantic model from desktop. Okay. Using the Teams hand feature, you can raise your hand. It's a button up top. How many of you have written a true DAX query before? And I asked that before I fully explain what it is. So let's see, I got 1, 2, 2 out of 30, 4, 5. Okay. We're about at the right range, 5, 6, maybe 10, right? That kind of makes sense, right? I see some people going up and down, but good, good. So maybe about a third of everybody, right? Uh, so for everybody else, what is the difference between a measure and a query? And these definitions that are up on the screen right now are right from one of the Microsoft documents, right? A measure, as we know, we use them quite often to produce a dynamic calculation, right? So it results in a scalar answer, right? So a single answer, always, right? You can never return a table with it, where a query is going to return a table. It's result set. So I tend to think of it like a SQL statement. So if you start thinking in those terms, that's the main difference between a measure and a query. Our measures are influenced fully by the query. And so what happens is Power BI takes your visuals and all the other information you put onto the reporting pane, and it generates a DAX query that it sends to the Vertipack, the backend engine, right? So that's our first usage that we talk about there. Any visual produces a query, and we're going to show you. I'm going to show you how to do that, how to capture it from the performance analyzer. If you write paginated reports against your data model, then you're going to have a DAX query, because paginated reports takes tables back from it. Just like when we write a paginated report and we write like to a SQL statement or a stored procedure, there's always a table being returned. Same thing with the DAX query. And then calculated tables, right? So probably a lot of people that have written DAX queries before have maybe written them in order to help produce a calculated table. Since I still see in the chat the picture of my friend Chris, Chris is big on no DAX calculated columns. So a calculated table obviously results in calculated columns. So he would be up against that. What we're going to show in the later part using those info views I talked about is how to see calculated columns inside the model, because we might want to get rid of them. Okay. So that kind of gives you a high level idea. And when we get into the demos, I'll show you how we capture the queries. But first, let's kind of go through and walk through what a query looks like. So on this side of the screen, we have, and I'm going to use my zoom in here. We have a very simple visual, right? That is just showing the months and I don't know what it's total unit price. It's hard to see. It's kind of blended in, right? So it's total unit price by month. And we're filtering down to the year 2013. So I captured this DAX query from Power BI, and I'm going to walk through this for you, right? So this is going to help explain, the parts of the DAX query. And I'm going to start almost at the bottom by looking at this evaluate. When I think of evaluate and I'm trying to translate it into SQL in my head, I think of this as select, right? So select, we don't have to specify columns or anything like that, but the next part's going to be kind of the from statements. What am I selecting from? Well, I'm selecting from this variable named primary DS0 primary windowed. And when I look up, I could see that is right here. Okay, so now I'm starting to make my connection. I'm saying select from this variable. So that must return a table because this is what every evaluate or select must return a table. So let's dissect this variable out a little bit. Well, it's using the top end function, which you may be useful. You might know, right? It's you may have used it before or thought about top end. So this is just saying I want the top rows from a table, and in this case, it's saying what the number of rows it wants is 1001. This part is the table, and it's using another variable called DS0 core. And um, Microsoft tends to name all of their things this way. And I see the question in the chat, is this DAX Studio? No, this is not DAX Studio. This is in Power BI Desktop, and it is available in all versions of Power BI Desktop. It's not only
Yeah.
premium.
How did you come to the screen actually? Can you show it
I
again?
will get to that after
Mm.
after I walk through the how a DAX query looks, right? But that's going to be next. That's coming up. Okay, so let's kind of just walk through, finish this. So then the top end is saying, I want you to use the calendar month number and the calendar month. Now, if you remember on our visual, we didn't have calendar month number. All we had was calendar month. The reason this shows up is because this data set, this semantic model, has a sort value set for month, which is month number. So that's why it has to get into this part of the query. Okay, so let's back up just a little bit. We got DS0 core, which is this big statement here, and it's using summarized columns. Summarized columns is one of the primary DAX functions used in queries. You'll see it quite a bit. So what this is saying is summarize the columns. The next two are its grouping columns. Again, the calendar month and the calendar month number. And the reason we have number is for that sorting. And in this case, this brings in another variable. And you notice they even named it filter. This next argument here in summarize columns. And if you need to look up the syntax of these functions, I strongly recommend using DAX.guide from the SQL BI folks. They have some of the best explanations of these functions. So we're not here to go into each one of the functions so that you could utilize that, but that would be a good place to look at it. Okay, so this right here, because I know this function very well, is a filtering table. So it's another table that's coming in, but it's going to act as a filter, and you can see it defined up here. We'll jump to that in just a second. And then the last part of this summarized columns is bringing back from this measure called total unit price. Now, one of the things that Power BI does that is against what we all say are best practices is it prefixes the table name to the measure. If you're writing your own DAX queries, you're best off not doing that. Only prefix columns. So this month is a column, month number is a column that needs to be prefixed, but measures shouldn't be prefixed. And it helps in the readability and the understanding of your DAX query. Okay, but Microsoft does what Microsoft does, right? So it's going to bring back a value for each row that summarizes for month and month number. It'll bring back one value from the measure, because remember, a measure will return only one value for its intersection, and it names that total unit price. Okay, so that's kind of how everything gets resulted out. And in this measure, the context comes from this summarization. So month and month number plus this filtering. And the filtering comes from our treat as function up top here. So treat as is a wonderful function that reads, I kind of read it the same way all the time here, right? It's just the way it's stated. Treat as 2018. So you can kind of break it to treat 2018 as, which is the second parameter, the calendar year value. So calendar year is on our calendar table, and it's passing this as a filter. And the place that it got this from, and see if I could do my arrows in the right direction, is right there. This filter on the filter pane generated this statement in this DAX query. Now, if I would have had a measure, or I'm sorry, not a measure, a slicer that was doing the same thing, that would get produced here as well, right? That would be another filtering table. So all of your slicers, all your filtering get put over as filter tables. They could push down into the summarized columns query as filtering tables to help change the context of your query. So you can kind of see how walking through this could give you your idea on what your context is when you're thinking about your measure. And then all of these other things here must be under this define section. And the define section is always at the top. And then you could have as many evaluate sections that you want underneath it. And then last is just our order by, and I cover that last because it's pretty much like, what we see in SQL. So I hope that kind of relates a little bit to SQL, or it gives you an understanding of how Microsoft puts DAX queries together. We don't always have to do it this way, but this is, to me, an important place to start, because as I'll show you here in a little bit, I'll show you how you capture this. I see somebody still has their hand up. I think that hand up was from the poll, but I just want to verify if anybody's got questions at this point. No problem, Victor. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. So as I kind of talked about, there's some functions we already covered, but here's some other popular DAX query functions. All of these functions return a table, basically, right? Summarize columns, which we just walked through. Treat as, which we looked at as well, but in treat as, right, because treat as does return a table, I could put the treat as just underneath the evaluate, and it'll show me what that table looks like. Top end we saw, calculate table, skipped over that in order if anybody was watching in order. Very similar to calculate, right? Where you're going to be able to change some of the context, some of the filtering expressions, the same way that calculate does. But this is going to return a table object to you. So calculate table works a lot like filter. And I think most people use filter than they do calculate table. I kind of like calculate table a little bit more than filter, but I find myself using it here and there. And then when you are trying to look at just a single measure, and you'll see this in card visuals a whole lot, is you could use the row function and you could give it a name and then tell it this is, you could build out an entire row to return for that table. Using it just one time will give you a single row, and you could have a single value. You could work it so you could get multiple values in there, or the two curly brackets. And I tend to use the curly brackets quite a bit when I'm just trying to say, overall, what does this measure give to me? And I'll wrap that in a curly bracket so that it takes that single value and it turns it into a single row, single column table. Very, very useful of these last two. But, there's more, but this is probably what you're going to see the majority of the time. Okay. So now we're going to kind of get into the demo, and we're going to show this is a preview feature. I don't think I said that earlier. I'll show you a little bit how to turn that on. And then I'll show you how we could get our first query, and then what the quick queries and the other features within there. Actually, I'm gonna go into the DAX query first and show you the query it just builds. Then I'll come back and show you the query from the visual, and then how to define measures. After we define measures, we're going to talk about your development process. So I hope you all are ready for that. Sorry, I've got just a little bit of a cough going on here. All right, so let me take this down. See the pretty picture that Microsoft picked for me today. Mine's changing out every day now. Something changed recently to do that, so which is fine. Okay, I have this. I don't know probably Teams. Let me do this. Yeah, something on Teams is keeping, because I'm on I have something different. Hopefully we won't need this very bottom part of the screen, but it's not a big deal at this point. Okay, so this is a sample report that Microsoft just puts out. And in one of the articles announcing the DAX query feature, it has a link to where you could just get this. So you're able to get this and download it and use it if you want. And in here, let's first talk about, we said it's a preview feature. Hopefully you know how to turn preview features on, but in case you don't, you're going to come over to this options and setting, and I'm going to click on that and go to options. And down below is preview features. And this is getting quite lengthy. I wish they would take some of these preview features out, right? Or get them actually over the line, and let's not call them preview features anymore. But you can see it's here towards the bottom. DAX query view. So you're going to have to check this. And this is one of those features that when you check it, you will need to restart desktop. So you check it, close desktop, restart it, open up your model, and you're good to go. Okay. So once you have that, you will see, come on, I just did that. You will see a fourth icon over here down at the bottom called DAX, right? So normally we would just see these three, and now DAX shows up as a fourth. Now you does have to have preview forever features. Yeah, thanks. You do have to have a local model in order for this to show up. So if you're working on a report that's connected to a model up in the service, also known as a thin report, you won't have that show up because your model exists in the service. But one of the things that you could do is turn on your direct query to the Power BI data set, right? Which is we were calling it composite model for quite a while. So I don't have one up that looks like that, but there would be a link down here, or just clicks on it. It says, do you want to make changes to this model? Once you do that, that's going to add a local model here, and you'll be able to run DAX queries against that remote data set. Okay. Yeah, shape map. how many years, Matt? 4 or 5 years at Shape Map? It's been that way? Yeah.
I think it's the earliest preview feature. I'm
I
not
think-
sure on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right too. So, okay. So now that we have it, let's go ahead and click on this just to see what it looks like. And I'm going to hit Control and use my the wheel on my mouse to zoom in. So that's kind of a nice feature so that you could make this bigger, and hopefully I think everybody could see this. There's a link up here. They even allow you to follow the link if you document anything within your DAX query to follow it. And this is going to be their basic announcement. It's in the list that I provided to you. So you'll see they just gave us a very basic query, evaluate top end 100 store. And we know store is one of the tables within our model. So we can come here and just click run, and that'll let us see exactly what our store table looks like. Now it looks a lot like, right? We're kind of used to going through and looking at our tables here. But in this case, this does, pretty much that exact same thing. It's going to just limit it to 100 rows right now. Okay, great. That helps us understand it a little bit more. It gets us kind of started. But what else can we do? Well, one of the things that we could do over here is we could click on, and I'm going to continue to use store. We could right click on it and we see we have this feature called Quick Queries. So this is going to help us look at and do some more about our table. So we just already have the show top 100 rows. So if you didn't want to write this evaluate store, this evaluate top end 100 for say district or whatever, you could come up here, right click on district, tell it and it'll generate it for you. But let's do something a little bit different. Let's see what kind of our data looks like, and let's use this quick queries, and I'm going to say column statistics. So you see it generated 383 lines of DAX. I am going to shrink this back down just a little bit so you can see some more. And what it's doing is it's producing a row. And remember, I talked about using the row the row function quite a bit. So this is what's using that. And in each row, it's putting a column called table. And in this case, it's setting it to a hard-coded value called store. And then the column, it's putting open month in here. And then it starts putting all the statistics. So account, what the distinct values are. And it uses a bunch of the features, count rows here minus, this is getting the null count, right? So this is using count rows minus the count, gives it a null count. That's a neat way of doing it. Min, max. So yeah, we can kind of get all this from our Power Query side too. But if we had a table that we did a calculated column on or the whole calculated table, we'd be able to get it here, or we just want to see it all in one place rather than in Power Query. And this kind of gives you an idea of, all that looks like. So it helps me understand my data a little bit more just by simply right-clicking on it and having it generate these 300 lines of DAX. So I think that's pretty cool as well. We'll get into the define measures or define all measures in just a little bit when we talk about your measure development process. Okay. But let's go back and kind of, this is all nice, but we want to get to something that looks like the query that I dissected for you, right? So it's going to be something that comes from one of our visuals. So I'm going to pick this visual here, and I'm going to come up to optimize and turn on Performance Analyzer. If you've never used Performance Analyzer before, don't be too worried about it, but get to know it, because if you're having issues with a slow report, this is going to give you a lot of good information, right? You can run it across the, I thought my map was there just a little while ago. I might not be logged into the right tenant, but anyways, so the Performance Analyzer will tell you a lot of what's going on your overall report, or even all within just one visual. So you start it, and then this pane shows up over here. We just simply say start recording. And I could come over and just analyze this one visual. And when I do that, you see it gives me some information down below. And here's this visual. I'm going to expand it out. And it tells me the DAX query itself took 6 milliseconds. The visual to display took 22 milliseconds. And then this other that's always drove us crazy, 29 milliseconds. Great. So we, if we were having performance problems, we could look through and try to figure out what to diagnose more. But we're more worried about what does the query look like? Well, this copy query has always been there. And if people have used DAX Studio before, I think DAX Studio was mentioned in the chat or whatever. We used to start here as we would bring up copy query, go over to DAX Studio, open up that third-party tool, connect to the model and everything, and then start doing it here. Well, we don't have to do that anymore unless we're trying to go deep, deep, deep into performance evaluation. DAX Studio still has a couple better features for figuring out the performance of a DAX query versus the desktop. But if we're just trying to figure out what our query is doing or how we want to change it, or as we'll see, how we could do a different measure development process, we're going to just click on this Run in DAX Query View. And what you'll see right away is it opened up, produced query number 3 for us, and we could rename these. And by the way, it says it up here that once you save these queries, if I save this model right now, even though it's in a PBIX format, the next time if I close out of this model and reopen it, these queries are still all available to me. They don't go away. If you use the new PBIP format, it actually saves them out as individual files. So you could go and grab those files and use them in something like DAX Studio or Tabular Editor. So you have your queries. John Kursky, who was also in Atlanta, also in North Austin, he works a lot with trying to come up with better DevOps approaches and doing testing. And he started to use these DAX queries to keep his testing queries within his Power BI desktop. It's a little bit more advanced. If you want to know more on that, go search him out. Him and I continue to talk. In fact, I was just talking with him just a little bit before this on how we could continue to advance testing and storing and using data, the DAX queries for that. So keep watching, more on that to come. Okay, so this should look very familiar to you, and I'm going to take these result sets down a little bit, right? This looks a lot like the query that I just walked through. So we could see exactly what Power BI is doing and what it's sending to its backend engine. So one thing this doesn't have is the treat as, because there's not really any other filtering kind of going on. You can see also when it opened up the query, I got the result sets right away. It ran it. So breaking this back down, we're going to skip looking at what primary window it is, because this is just a paging technique that Power BI puts in place, right? So we know that we're doing our main work is summarize columns on the fiscal month and period. And we're getting 2 measures in this case, this year's sales, which is just a reference to total sales TY for whatever reason that they wrote this model, right? And I see that because you can see it popped up what the measure definition is. Now, if I hover over this one and you see it pops up the measure definition, it's a bigger statement, right? So it's a total sales variable percent, variance percent. What do y'all think about this measure definition? Is this how you would write this? Anybody? Or I'll raise my hand. I wouldn't, right? I would now, and this is maybe something that somebody wrote years ago. No. Thanks, Fernando. Right? We would tend to use the divide function. So we're going to look at that next and how we're going to change this measure and how we're going to make sure everything still works correctly. But before we do that, let's also kind of get into, let's go back to our report page here. And I'm going to clear this out. And I'm going to go ahead and click here, right? Which you see filters this this visual here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and grab it again just to be super careful. I'm going to clear that out and do analyze so I know I get the right one. And now let's go ahead and say run in DAX query view. And we could see we have a little bit different query now, right? So we have the treat as is reintroduced because that other visual gave us a filtering context. So that was passed back to us by it saying use the value Lindsay's as the chain on the store table. And it's providing that. Where is it providing that? Okay, that's weird. Oh, here it is. It's using it over in this part of the query, because you see that what that's doing is, right, that was highlighting part of it. It wasn't totally, right, just filtering down. If I was doing filtering, this query would have been built a little bit different, right? But in this case, it's sending it in and it's actually producing kind of like a almost implicit measure, right? To where it's saying calculate this year's sales, keep filters, and add on what's in this filter table. So that's how it gets its other value. And it's doing the same for this one as well. Okay, great. Before I leave, right, so you can come in and always do this and kind of compare the two queries. And I use that when I first got started with DAX queries to really start learning about DAX queries and what they look like. I'm going to take another quick pause and a sip of water to see if anybody's got any questions at this point or anything they want to ask about. All right, everybody's just saving their voice for when I ask about your measure development process. I love it. I love it. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to get the definition of this, right? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go ahead and search for that. And now I can come in here and I could right click and I could say define and evaluate. And let's see what that does. So that puts the definition of my measure right in my DAX query. And this is one of the neat things about DAX queries and this whole structure is you could override your measures definition within that particular query. And then it will use this definition over the model's definition. If you don't have the measure defined in the query and it does exist in the model, it's going to use the model's definition. This also means that as I'm developing measures, I don't have to add them to my model yet. I could just do them inside the query to sit there and test out ways that I want to do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now copy this over here. And we're going to go back to query 3 because that's a little bit simpler query to look at. And I'm going to put this again into my query. Now, the time everybody's ready to talk about your measure definition process. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint and move on to my next slide. How do y'all do measure development today? How many is it that's on the left-hand side of this screen? You kind of create a measure, then you create a visual with that measure, and you go, well, that's the right, that is kind of the right results. It isn't the right results, right? So you start overwriting the measure, right? Or you go, wait a minute, I want to keep that version of it with tabular editor. Yeah, tabular editor is really nice for it, but you know, Fernando, you're just more advanced, Fernando. But Sharon, yeah, this kind of sounds like yours, or even more so, right? You create new measures instead of overriding it, and then You got, you know, measure 1, measure 2, measure final, you know, measure 1 final, measure 2 final, and then you're at this point where you go, well, what was the one that last worked for me? I don't remember anymore. With DAX queries, final, yes. With DAX queries, you could use more of what I have on the right-hand side, right? And I'm going to show you this process. So we start with a new query, and we see we can get that new query right from the optimizer, right? And then we could go into that query and document what our measure requirements or as comments or give information on why we're doing it. And remember, when we save our PBIX, that's going to be saved in there. So now we have something that future you is going to really like present you about to go, oh yeah, now I remember why I did that. Then you could, you know, use the define measure section that I just showed you and write queries to test that measure. And you can sit there and change the measure and rerun it, but you're not modifying the semantic model yet. Because remember, I was saying this is local to that query. So therefore, you haven't changed anything yet. And then you could save the measure back to your model. And that's going to be super easy. And I'm going to show you why that's super easy. And then you save the entire model and it's there for the next time. Let me look at what my next slide is. Yeah, so now I'm just going to go into, let's demo that process. What do I have at the end here? Okay, now I remember got to always remember my presentations, right? So let's go back and demo this. Okay, so I have my measure defined in here. We've already said we don't like this. We'd rather use a divide. But because I'm very particular on my DAX, I always like to format. And we see that we have the format query up top here. And we could just click on that and that starts formatting everything. It makes it more readable. But what I want to point out to you is this part that just popped up here. So even if you're not modifying your measures, if you open up or you use your define all measures and tell it to format, that could be a simple way to format your DAX code in your measures and save it back to the model, because you'll have this update model overwrite measure. You'll end up clicking on each one of them. But right now, I could update this and it would be no change in the logic, but it would be a formatted measure. Yeah, I'm reading that other comment. So yeah, that's a good way. The way get the proper ones, right? But it's even if you're changing one of those proper ones, you know, that I would say not the intermediate measures. Maybe your intermediate measures are your testing measures, but yeah, that could work and keep yourself organized. You know, so we'll see if maybe this would work better for some people. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I have this measure defined, and I'm going to simply take a copy of it and have it local to this query. And I'm going to change the name of it to just put orig in front of it. Okay. So now you'll see what that changed to is it recognized I have a new measure, right? So up top, it's saying, do you want to overwrite the measure? Because it's letting you know, it's cueing you that it exists in the model. And the second one doesn't exist in the model. So now that I have this, I'm going to come back down into my summarized columns. And I'm going to repeat this last line. And I'm going to call this the variable ORIG underscore. And I'm going to change it to reference the orig. Oops, too much on the IntelliSense there, but that's fine. Okay, so now this is referencing the measure that is only defined in my query. And the reason I want to do that is I'm going to go ahead and run this. And I have my table down below, and I could see Let me zoom in a little bit, right? Both measures return the exact same value. And that's important in testing, right? To make sure that, hey, did any of my values change when I change this measure? And, if you're using the process that we first talked about and you're changing that measure on the fly, then you got to kind of remember it. Maybe take a screenshot, you're writing numbers down, or that's why a lot of people go, well, let me produce a couple more measures in the model so I can compare them. You don't have to keep adding what I say is kind of junk to your model or things that you have to remember to get rid of, because these are local to this query only. Okay, so now that I have this, I'm going to come back and I'm going to change this one. So I'm going to take all of this code out, and I want to change this to use the divide function. So you can see it has IntelliSense, and it, is giving me a little bit of information, which is always nice to kind of see how to build this out. And then I'm a copy and paste type of person. So I'm going to come down here, copy, put this in here, put this in here. Okay. So now, again, it's telling me I could overwrite the measure, right? And it still knows that this one is new. I'm going to format my query because, in my opinion, no DAX will run unless it's formatted. Or also, my opinion is DAX runs faster when it's formatted. Anybody else have that opinion? Just me? Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and click run again. And my test pass, right? I could see that even though I changed how I wrote the measure, and obviously this is a very simple example. We know it's going to work so that, I can't famously mess up my demos like I do on Fabric Friday. If you join us on Fabric Friday, you'll understand. I mess up all my live demos. It's fun. All right. But so now I'm going, yes, this works. I like this better. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this overwrite measure. But before I do that, let's come over here. I'm going to I'm going to stop my performance analyzer, knock that down. We were looking for that. Let me go grab the name of it again, make sure that's up in my queue. I don't think it was the very latest in my queue, and I've learned not to put my whole search results in there. So if I click on this, right, you can see it's still the old logic that exists inside my model. And I'll zoom in just to make sure you guys could see that. So you make sure there's nothing up my sleeves. And now I'm going to click overwrite measure. It gives me this nice little warning message because you can't use Control-Z to undo it, right? Which is another reason why I like to copy the old code down, is and then I even save this a lot of times, and I may come back later on and comment it out, or if I'm going to change it another time in the future, that's when I'll get rid of it. But, I have kind of my last version there. So I'm going to go ahead and say update model. And I went ahead and completed that. Now, if I come back over to this side, click on it again, and you can see, voila, right? Without having to worry, do I have the right code? Did I break anything else? I have a repeatable way to change and edit my measure process, right? I kind of like it. I do this all the time, and I kind of teased. I don't have a demo for it, but I teased a little bit that I learned something new about this. And the thing that I learned new the other day that I really thought was kind of interesting is if you're doing row level security and you go say view as a role or view as another person, and you go into the DAX query part, it is also viewing it as that person. At first, I kind of thought, oh, that's probably just going to handle from this visual layer. And let me go write a query and look at something different. I found it now is I ended up with a better way for me to test that my row level security was working. All right, let me catch up a little bit on the chat. Is a new version of the warning mess. It's a new version of the warning. Yeah, I don't remember. Let's see what version of desktop this one is. I think it's still, yeah, it's still Feb, but I know there was like a point release to Feb. So, but Fernando, you could be right. I'd have to go back, maybe look at a recording from earlier this month on whether that was a more affirming rather than a negative message. So Sharon, I'm glad you liked the process. Anybody got anything else before that they want to see on this part of the process before I jump into the next section? And I always say that because it gives me a chance to drink.
So Kevin, you envision, or when you open up a desktop now,
Mhm.
you'll have several scripts on the bottom there that'll just be saved along with that desktop file, that you can have test scripts or old measures or archives or notes. All right.
Yeah, exactly. And you could come in, double click, and rename these, right? So I could give it a name, and then so you can give it a more descriptive name. You're not allowed to move them around, right? You could close them, cancel them, right? I don't know if I wonder, that's kind of something interesting. I didn't realize that, but maybe that'll come in the future.
And so when
Yeah.
you save this as a PBIP and you're using SourceSafe, you could actually just track all that stuff too.
Yep, you're stealing a little bit of my thunder, just a little bit later on. But yeah, no, you're fine. Let me, because you brought it up, I was going to show that as we get into, I got another model open and I was going to show that, but let me bring over, let me knock this down so it's easier to see. But this is just looking at the Explorer view from another model I'm going to bring up here in just a second. And it's based off the Contoso data. So if I look at when you save as a PBIP, which is another preview feature, so you have to turn that on, it saves the file in a way. This is a PBIP, which I always have a hard time saying it, a desktop project file. And it creates multiple folders underneath it, one of them for the data set. So if we page over here, we see a folder for DAX Queries. And you see actually one I renamed called column with stats, and then one I left as query one. So the file names even get set with what that tab, how I just showed you on the tab to change the name. And yes, if you're using, I haven't used SourceSafe in years, but I use Git repositories like so in Azure DevOps or GitHub, and mostly Azure DevOps because that's what's supported up on the service. Yes, when you check these in, right, there'll be version just like everything else in your version control. You make changes, you're able, because it's all a text file, you're able to do compares. And where John was kind of taking it is I think he grabs them from the repository because he knows the section in the repository, and he could just grab the ones that I think he prefixed them with test or whatever, and then he has a way to automate running the tests. So if you ever get a chance to see him talk about that, now that you understand this feature, I'd strongly urge you to see his. Okay. Great question. Yes, SourceSafe is being stuck back in time, but that's okay. All right, so let's go, since I already introduced that I was going to open this Contoso model. I do want to go back to my presentation actually first, and I'm going to page on. So along with releasing this feature, the Power BI team added these information DAX functions. And so, yes, it looks like it's a spelling mistake, right? But info. So we got info functions. They all start with info. And if you're ever familiar with Oh, thanks, Fernando. Yeah, put in his, yeah, John's YouTube channel, his blog and everything. So introduce yourself to John. So yeah, these functions are based upon what's called the dynamic management views. Currently, it's the ones from the TM schema. I can't remember what the TM stands for. But there's over 50 of these functions, giving you all kinds of information about the metadata back inside your semantic model. The four that you're probably going to use the most and that we're going to get started with is info.columns, which is obviously, yeah, maybe tabular model schema. Thanks, Fernando. That's a good catch. Info.columns, right? So they're all set the same way. It's info and then dot. And then, so columns is going to be columns. Measures obviously gives me measures, relationships, and tables. So I want to show you a little bit of how this works and how these happen. And this is out in the GitHub that I have. Actually, I think, let me go through, because I have a little bit of time. I want to open up one of my GitHub, because I want to show you about the calculated columns first. So let me get that. I should have had this open beforehand, but that's okay. I'm going to pull this window over. I'll get rid of my presentation. So you see I have a folder called model infos, and there's a query that actually kind of came out with the release. I think Zoe is the one that kind of released all this, but she's on the Power BI team. So you see I've referenced where it comes from. So let's copy this into a DAX query in the model we've been working with. So we're going to go back to our store sales. And of course, I make it too big so we can't see because I got something that won't go away on the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to open up a new query because I can make this one bigger. And it's, a 54-line query. And it starts out and it defines variables. And, a variable could be anything that you want it to be. And they work kind of like constants once they're run. They don't change. But in this case, I'm setting a variable that I named tables. And I'm using my normal, I'm using a function called select columns. And I'm using filter. We talked about filter earlier. And it's filtering this info tables, right? This is the new DAX function that returns a table, and it's a table about the tables in your semantic model, and it's just filtering out any that are hidden so it doesn't show up. And select columns here, which is at the very outer, renames the column called ID, renames it to table ID, and name gets renamed to table name. Similar type of thing for columns. It just goes ahead and gets anything. It's going to take, there's a row number column that gets produced within your backend semantic model. It's getting rid of those. Now here's where a little bit of the magic occurs. It's using this natural inner join for those of you that are used to SQL, right? This is just your regular inner join or join. And when this happens, I'm joining columns to tables, and it figures out what the join columns are based upon the names. That's why it was important for me to rename these two up here. And then I'm able to select the columns that I want to return and rename them. So I'm going to take table name, rename it to table. The column, this explicit name is how it names it in this this columns info view, right? It's just going to be named column. We'll get the description and everything. And then you see I'm building a switch statement, right? Or the Microsoft team actually who built this code out. They're taking the information they know that type. When it's a type 1, it's a data column. When it's a type 2, it's a calculated column. And if it's something we don't know, we just return what the type number was so we can look into that later. And if it happens to have a DAX formula with it, the expression comes out. So then remember I said we could run evaluate, right? We have one defined section. We could have multiple evaluate sections. So think of it kind of like if you're used to SQL store procedures, right? Where it's going to say, you know, I declare variables and then I do a select and I do another select, and that store procedure returns two result sets, kind of the same thing. All right, so let's go ahead and run this and see what it comes back. So you see this first result set, because this is evaluate was 1, it's result set 1, it's telling us 6. So what that's telling us is we're counting the rows using the result set, and we're filtering that down to say, hey, how many rows do I have are calculated columns? Remember we talked about these curly brackets? Because count rows returns a single value, right? Just this number. So it's taking this number 6 and returning and changing it into a single column, single row table with the value 6. So we know we have 6 calculated columns on here. We could change to result set 2 and see which ones they are. So when we go through, say, a code review or audit, whatever you want to call it, right? The gauntlet. And somebody could just go ahead and run this type of query against the model and say, hey, our best practice is not to use store or not to use calculated columns. You need to get rid of these or, you know, come up with your exception reasons for why. It's a very simple way to do it. Okay, so that's one easy way to do this. And now I'm going to switch over to my other model, because in this query that I have, it fails for some reason inside that model. It's got this model that Microsoft has had some old data types or whatever. Okay, so here is my Contoso-based model. You can see over here that I've switched and I got just my normal store, promotion, date, customer sales. This is that big, long, this one is 72. And what I did here is, again, I'm starting out with, hey, tell me all the tables, and I'm going to take out any of the ones that are hidden. So very familiar. I'm going to get the same type of columns. So we know we're going to join those two together. But I'm also using a function in here that is column statistics. Now, there are also info dot functions that have some of the statistics in it. I haven't seen them I've seen them come up different than this. So you could look between the two and decide which one to do it. And this is the function that breaks on the other model for some odd reason. So there's still more work on some of these type of things. So it's going to run this column statistics, and it's going to select these values from it. You see I'm taking table name and column name, putting them together to get kind of a unique name so I could join to it. And you'll see where I do that here in just a little bit. And just to keep it simple, I'm getting the cardinality, min, max, and the length. So I first come in and I'm going to, just like we did before, that natural join for columns and tables. It's going to go into this table columns variable. And then for the whole results, I'm taking that table columns and joining that column statistics status. Why did I name it status? I don't know. I have to go back and fix some of my stuff, but column stats is what I meant for that. And I'm going to just grab the columns that I want and then return that as a result. So let me go ahead, click off, and bring this up. And you can see as we kind of browse through here, I got the table name, customer is the first one that's going to come up. Is there an order by on that? I can't remember. You could order it if you want to see it to come up different. If you have a description in your model, it'll show up if the data category exists. But then here's the cardinality telling me how many rows that I have, the min, max, and the length. So yeah, it's kind of Mike put in there, right? This is great for documentation. There are other third-party tools that will help you with some of this, but this is an easy way to keep something right within your model. Now I could come in here and I could click on this to select the whole table and do like a Control C and paste. I could paste this directly into Excel. And if you go through some of their articles, there's a couple other ways they talk about getting the data into Excel. But, you know, this would be a very easy way to grab this information and send it out to, say, one of your developers. If you're developing the model, sending it on to somebody else that's going to develop the reports for it. So that's about it that I have to show you. Appreciate all the comments and things along the way. Any questions, anything that we could cover for that?
Kevin,
Yeah.
this is great. Thanks for sharing this. So just to follow up on the documentation, I think there are some DAX functions like that you can write. You could probably wrap some of this into to send it to CSV or send it to text, I think, right?
Yeah, so here, you know, I haven't thought about that before, but let's think about that when we write this. So I'm going to put a space here and I'm going to go to CSV. And you notice it's not coming up, but the reason being is that function returns a single value, right? Because that's intended to be used inside measures to return something. So I'm going to have to wrap that to make it the single row again. Maybe it's all one word. Yes, it's just one word. Okay. So to CSV is going to take this. I don't have to give it a provide, but it's convert these records of a table into a comma separated value text. But it is going to return just one. Let's take this off and I'll show you the error that we're going to get, right? Or I'll show myself wrong and we won't get an error. But we're going to get an error because that's going to give us, right, the expression specified in the query is not a valid table expression, right? But if I did it this way, now that's going to be a single row, single column table if you wanted to copy it down as a CSV. But I think it's just as easy to bring back all the results.
Yeah.
And copy the whole thing.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that it's not a 2 underscore CSV. It's just 2 CSV is what we learned through IntelliSense. And we could actually call it IntelliSense here because it's in the Microsoft product. And the other tools, because Microsoft has a copyright on IntelliSense, the other tools have to call it helper or whatever, right? Editing helper. I can't remember the terms that they use, but to get around that.
Kevin, I got a question for you.
Sure.
On the DAX query view and the results, right? You know, so now you've got how the results. I know the queries get saved, but do the results get saved? Like if you close the file and you reopen it again, are you going to see the results or do you have to run the query again?
No, you have to run the query again because the results, yeah, that's kind of an interesting point. I think I see where you're going there. Like if you could save these results to then have something change and then see the results when you run it 2 days later.
Exactly. You know,
Yeah.
if someone went and said, hey, your data is wrong, and you go and say, well, when I designed the semantic model, this is what I got. But, but if it's not saving the results, if it's only saving the query, then yeah, you do have to go and take that and throw it in an Excel file or something to show somebody. So
yeah.
interesting.
Well, and this is kind of one of the things that John, Christina, she just got married. Her last name is Ferris now, or was Hughes. The three of us have been talking about ways to improve some of this. And one of the things that I wrote in PowerShell a long time ago was a concept that I called data quality monitor. And through that, I'm running different DAX queries and then saving those results so that it's comparable all the time. And we're kind of talking about how to grab the queries from here and maybe move into that or how to blend that and other stuff. But
Right.
that's how I would solve it. And I want to change the code of that. So like kind of I'll just bring Fabric into play. If I ported that, say, to Fabric, I could take the same structure to where I define these queries and run it on a daily basis, right? And then I have a way to serialize that result and then compare that result day over day, right? Compare it to the previous day or compare it to something that I've saved before so that I can see, hey, I didn't expect this to change, but it changed,
Right.
right? Um, so yeah, there's definitely things that a bunch of us, I don't know that Microsoft's going to work on something that robust, but we're going to work on patterns to show out, and then maybe another 6 months or so, I'll be able to come back here and demo that for y'all.
Yeah. Hey, if we can just get them to fix the core visuals like they've been working on, I think that's a win, So
So I haven't watched it, so I hope it's good. But my buddy Chris, he does another live stream every Wednesday at noon, and he had Miguel on presenting his roadmap for the core visuals. And so you've seen a couple updates to that, right? Like the
right.
new slicer, the new card visual. Um, if you ever watch what Miguel's kind of putting out, and I think there's a LinkedIn group as well that they're letting anybody into, that they're talking about where they're trying to go with the core visuals. They're they're going to get improved greatly over this next, I don't know the timeline, but I would say definitely over the year. And they're trying to he's got a great vision. Um, he wasn't he wasn't at Microsoft. I think he was somewhere else, and Microsoft brought him in because of his vision with all of this, and he's just trying to work through with the team to get it going. It's going to be even more amazing when he gets there. So yeah, keep an eye on that. But go back out to Chris's YouTube channel and look for the live stream he did at noon today, and that'll tell you more on where they're going. I wish I would have
Excellent.
watched it, but I had a client meeting at that time, so you
I
know
think
how
I
that
got the
goes.
I think I got the meeting. I think I got the email, with the link. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I definitely need to see it, So there's just a few got yous in every little visual, it seems. So
Yeah, I'll use Hey Fernando like Hey Alex. Can you go find that link to Kratos today?
yeah.
Yeah, I saw him advertise it. I didn't get a chance to attend it though. I think I saw another live stream with him though, and in that live stream, he was talking about the roadmap, but maybe today he goes into more detail. In that live stream, he talked about the fact that he now not only owns this kind of helping with the visuals, but also the canvas of Power BI. So,
Mm-hmm.
you have like the canvas area. So he's going to be able to take advantage of that as he's working with the team to redevelop the visuals too.
Yeah, and Fernando just put the link in that I'm pretty sure that's the one. Yeah, it's Power BI in 2024 with him, so it's definitely talking about that roadmap. So yeah, go out there and take a look at that. Thanks, Fernando.
Hey,
Any other
Kevin,
questions? Yeah.
yeah, you used to have, maybe you still do, there was a published to web report that you gathered all the user group meetings out there, all the meetups,
Yeah.
is that still around, or is that
I wish
dead?
I wish it died. Something changed on the meetup site that broke the Power Query. And then I kept meaning, I actually started rewriting the web scraping in Python and got pretty far with it. And then I just got busy with a bunch of other stuff. So I need to get myself back on that. Um, and then to make this decision of whether I'm going to host it on Fabric or not. I may host the data entry or the data scraping part. Even if I got to pay for it, I have a way of, since you could stop your Fabric capacity and only run it for a little bit, if I could do the web scraping with the capacity up and then refresh
Yeah.
the data set, now I can host it off of the shared capacity without paying for anything. So yeah, I just got to find time to get back to that. But Sean, I've had a couple people ask me, and so now I got to go back through and my whole marketing to get it going again. I think somebody even was talking about putting it in their book. So kind of sorry that it broke, but you know, got to pick and choose your time, right? So
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Well, all right. Anybody else have any questions, comments?
appreciate the comment in the chat, Norma. That it was well explained. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I have a question. I'm kind of new to Power BI. It looks like there's a lot of uh, functions and calculations to learn. For somebody starting out, what would you recommend? How to
Yeah,
go?
I get this question a lot, and where what I what I think is a little bit different than where a lot of other people think. But I would take learning the visualizations last because they're kind of easy, especially if you're keeping with the simple visualizations. But if you want to learn how to do Power BI the right way, the first thing you want to learn, and you can find all this out on the Microsoft Learn content, but really start to understand the data model and how to turn your source system into a good star schema. That's the key to everything. If you could start understanding how to turn the data model into that star schema, that will make your DAX code easier. That'll make your reporting easier, right? And so I always say start there, even though that's may not be the order that Microsoft pushes you towards. Like if you do dashboard in a day, they're teaching more of the visualizations and things like that. And they get a little bit into the data modeling, but I would really focus on how to do the data modeling. And then once you understand what you want to data model, you got to know how to transform it to get it there. So whether that's Power Query, right, in the transform part of it, and then how to turn it into it and use that to start building out your Power Query skills. Then start, once you have that all done, now your relationships come together very easily in that star schema. Then really start focusing in on the DAX. And what you'll find when you do that, you're going to have very simplified DAX that probably 90% of your reporting is going to be able to be done with some average, you know, the basic functions, some average min, just like we're showing here, min max. Along with that, I would utilize the tool that SQL BI puts out called Bravo. Bravo will help you produce your date table in your model and fit it into the star schema. And you're going to have a star schema for it to fit in there. But the other thing it does is measures that you've already created, it will produce all the time intelligence measures for it. So it's just auto-generated. And even though I know how to write a bunch of those time intelligence measures, I turn to Bravo and just let it do it for me. And it becomes super, super easy. And you get a very sophisticated model and everything very quickly through doing that. Then now you're going to put together your visuals, right? And it becomes extremely easy because you have everything shaped the right way. Yes, and as Sean put the link in there, it's a free tool. That to me is the right way to do it. Now, where I think people run into the stumbling blocks on it is they always want the visualizations right away, especially if you're doing it for work. If your manager is asking you, hey, I need this report, they don't care that it takes you this much to change the data, this, that, and the other. They just want to see the visualization. So that's where a lot of people shortcut everything. So if you could buy the time to do that or shortcut it and give them something and then go back and learn the right way. But once you learn the right way to do it and you get better and better at it, you'll never go back to the other way because you'll have the one reason people I think fail at DAX the most is they don't put their model together correctly. Now, if you're getting into very complex type measures, then of course you got to learn a lot more DAX or now start moving away from some of that complex DAX and look into the brand new feature called Visual Calcs, and that'll help get you there. So still a lot. Was it Joe that asked that? Did I see the name come off correctly? Joe A.
Yes, that's right.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Just ask AI. Yeah, just have your company pay for an F-64 or above, so you could get Copilot and let it do the work for you.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. How does Copilot plays into all this now?
Yeah, so Copilot definitely plays into it, and there's already preview features for Copilot to help you write DAX. There's preview features for Copilot to help you do Power Query, produce the report, all of that. And, because I don't want to use the word but, and that's only accessible to you if you have a premium capacity, and we were talking about how those are changing and kind of going away. So a P1 premium capacity or its equivalent on the fabric side, the F64. And if you're starting on the fabric side today, you're gonna, or if you go out to get a capacity brand new, you're gonna get the fabric side, the F64. And so it has to be that level or above that you're purchasing, and those are reserved instance prices, list price, $5,000 a month. So you got to be, have some good justification to do that, and that's where you could start using the co-pilots. I see my camera went all funky on me again. Not per user. Sorry, share. A capacity is not a user license. It is kind of like, think about it as renting a server, right? So it's $5,000 for everything you could fit onto that capacity. The other thing is when you have the P1 or the F64 and above, you only have to license the people with the pro license that are going to do the development. So everybody viewing the report no longer needs to pay for the $10 license. So that's where we used to see a lot of people make the switch to get into the P1, is if they had 500 viewers or more, they would immediately just say, get the P1, and then I only have to pay for, I use a number around 10%, right? So they're going to pay for 50 pro licenses so they could publish the report plus the 5,000. And so that's, $5,050 a month, and they could have unlimited number of viewers from that point forward, but and then keep their cost in line.
All right.
All right, back to y'all.
Great. I think we're, everybody hang around. Mike, are you ready to rock on the?
Yeah, we can go through this, Sean. Yeah, I think I've got everybody ready to go. Now we can go. I don't have the slides pulled up, so if you could maybe just page down, we can go through these real quick. So what we're going to do now is, so every month we basically have an opportunity to provide subscriptions, or I guess you could call them like kind of free subscriptions to a couple of platforms. The first one is Enterprise DNA, and I think most everyone knows about Enterprise DNA. They're basically a really good resource. They've got a lot of training videos on Power BI. They've branched out into other things too, like within the Power Platform. So Power Automate, we've got some trainings on that. There's some stuff out there on Python, SQL. So lots of good like best practices and good. It's a good resource to help you learn as you're getting kind of into Power BI, or even people that have used it. I mean, it's a really good resource for them too, that have used it for some time. There's a lot of good tutorials out there that you can take advantage of. So the way that their subscription works is basically it's good for 1 year. So it's essentially a yearly subscription, and you can use that as much as you want over the course of that year. And every month they give us the opportunity. Is it 2 drawings that they give us? I forgot how many they give us for each meeting that we have.
Yeah, every month we get 2. Okay.
Yep. So yeah, so we'll go through this one first. What you see here is kind of the other things you could take advantage of. So if we're ready to go, we'll do the first drawing for the subscription, and then we'll do another one, and then we'll jump to Radicad. That'll be the next thing that we look at. So let me get that ready to go here. Let me queue up our Wheel of Fortune spinner. Just give me a second here, and I'll share. Okay, I got my list of names. I'll share as soon as I can get it queued up here. Okay, so now I did spend a lot of time watching Kevin's presentation because it was so good. So I tried to keep up as best as I could with the people that were left in the meeting. But let me share my screen. Let's take a look at this. And you can tell me if I'm missing anyone or if somebody is no longer in the meeting, I'll pull them out. So let me share the screen. Entire screen. Here we go. Share. Okay. So you should, let me put this over here. There we go. Can you see the spinning with his list of names?
Yes.
Okay. So just at a glance, just see, let me know if I missed someone. If you don't see your name here, please speak up. I can drop you in. And then Matt, Sean, Sajad, if you could just help check quickly to see if anybody I've listed here is no longer in the meeting. That would be helpful.
Also, if you have won before,
oh yeah,
you can only win once. So that was that is the term. So if you see your name and you've already won in the past, then please tell us.
No. Does this look okay? For this again, this is for Enterprise DNA. Just in case anybody didn't know.
Yeah, and that is correct. Yes, you can only win once, even if it was last year and it's expired now. You're not, they you can only win once in your life, at least according to what they've told us so far. And on the Enterprise DNA, what they also told us was that the at one time there was, I think it had to do with existing content versus new content. So if you won before they did the switchover, then I think they had said you would have access to that existing content forever. But when the year was up, you would not get any new content. So again, please check with Enterprise DNA if if you need to clarify, because it is their rules. We just are lucky enough that they allow us to give away these subscriptions or these scholarships. So.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Matt.
So, and like I said, yeah, it's if the course was there before your membership expired, then you should be able to see that, I think, forever. But like I said, any new courses, we may not have access to it. Again, clarify with Enterprise DNA.
All right. Are we ready to spin? Does this look okay?
All right. So you removed. It says you can remove Chris.
Okay.
And Bharat said that he was already there, but he's not even on the list. And
right, yeah, I pulled him up. I have a
and
check
then,
that I do.
yeah, and then Sarah, I think you have removed her, so I think we're good there. All right. I guess go ahead and spin. So.
There we go. Let's see who our first winner is. It is Adrian. Congratulations, Adrian. If you are there, please drop your contact information in the meeting chat so we can get you the details.
Yeah, we will need first name, last name, and email address, please.
Yeah, let me know, Matt, if he's still there, or if
I
he's
don't
dropped to
see
something.
Adrian.
Okay, then we'll do it again. I'll remove him and we'll do it again.
Yeah, I don't see him.
All righty.
Oh,
Moving
no,
on.
One more time.
I think, no, he's not here anymore. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. How about Ellie?
Ellie. Yeah, she's
Love more
here.
applause.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Congratulations, Ellie. Yeah, just drop your information in the chat and we'll get you the details. I'll go ahead and do another one. So I'm going to remove Ellie. And here's our second winner for Enterprise DNA. Looks like it's Joe A. That's what I saw on the list of people. Don't know if they're still there though.
No,
Don't think there's.
No, I don't see Joe A.
Okay,
So,
let's do it again.
all right. And Ellie Sinclair is, I have information in chat. So that is a verified winner. So one
The
more.
next one, wow, it's right on the line. That's Jeff. Is Jeff still there?
no.
Nope. I'm gonna do it again. Everyone's chances are getting better and better.
Yeah. Odds are always in your favor.
That's right. Naba.
What about?
I don't see it.
I don't see nada.
No dice. Okay. Going again. If we get down to one person, then you're going to be.
You get the winner.
You could win both.
Right.
James is still
It's
here.
James
yeah.
there.
Yeah, I see James.
Okay. All right, James. Congrats. Just drop your details in the chat.
Yes. Yes. James
Okay.
Edwards. If we can just get your email address, then we can know that we have a guaranteed winner.
I guess I'll wait just for a sec, just in case.
Got an awesome. Thank you. James has put in his contact information.
Okay.
That is our second guaranteed winner.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in the Radicad names. I'll explain the Radicad subscriptions so we don't have to bounce back and forth between screen share here. So Radicad basically is good for a 1 month subscription to their platform. So that's run by RazorRad, basically. Again, it's a really good training platform for Power BI. So everyone knows Razor and Radicad, I'm sure. So a lot of good material, a lot of good content. The way that works is it's good for a 1 month subscription. I think that's worth like $50 or so. I forget how much the monthly fee is.
That's correct.
to pay.
That's what I remember from the slide.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what this drawing is for a 1 month subscription to the Radicad platform.
Right. And if you were a past Radicad winner, you cannot win again. If you have won Enterprise DNA in the past, you can still win Radicad.
Yes. Now, this is my second list. Now, I didn't adjust my second list, so I know some people are no longer here because some of these people were the same that we had in the last lists. Who else? Trying to remember who we pulled off.
Yeah, that's fine. Why don't you just go spin and we will see who is the person who comes up first. It might be easier than checking the names.
Maybe we'll just get lucky and find someone that's there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Norma A.
Yep, it's there.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Congratulations, Norma. Just drop your details.
All right. Yes. Norma, please put in your last name and also your email address. And then you'll be a verified winner.
Excellent. Okay, I'll stop sharing. That was my my screen share for the meeting today. Was there anything else, Sean, you wanted to?
No, there
Any other
was,
thoughts?
we don't have anybody booked for next month yet. So if y'all, anybody out there needs to, any ideas, let us know. We're actively looking for next month.
Yes, and the rest of the year, actually, so.
Yeah, and for,
We're
yeah,
looking for
and for
people.
2024, yeah.
Yep,
Yes.
And
good.
Kevin's still around. So thanks again, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks,
Yes.
Kevin, that was great. Thanks so much
Yeah.
for sharing that with
Yeah,
us.
you're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thanks for the invite, John, and look forward into running into all y'all again.
Hey, Kevin, I'm gonna hit you up separately. I'm gonna be in the Dallas area next week for some client meetings. I was just gonna see if you were gonna be around. We could try to connect. But
I would
I'll send you the
love
details.
to. I leave for Vegas on Monday,
Vegas.
then return on Friday.
Oh, good for you. Okay, well, maybe
Yeah.
we'll connect this trip then.
Sorry. Yeah, next time. Definitely anytime reach out and we'll try to get together.
Okay, sounds good. Have fun,
All right.
guys.
All right, thanks everybody.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you.
Take care.
Everybody have a good week.
You too. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.